blossom. I mean, just nature outside. And it's a good thing to do, and it leads to gratitude. And I know my other parts of my family are Orthodox, and they say Baruch Hashem after things. And it got to me how wonderful that is, to be grateful for so many things. And I think that's a great thing.
Yes, Baruch Hashem means, blessed is the name. They don't even say God's name. Hashem means name. But I was thinking, even if you don't know the blessing, if you said Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who made this beautiful morning smelling, today I woke up and I checked the air quality every day. And early this morning in LA, the air quality was good, not moderate, not, dangerous for sensitive people. It was actually green, good. And I went, I should have said a bracha, because I would like to thank God for that. It's so rare. And I opened all my windows and I was saying, yes, I want to fill up my house with this clean air. I really am so appreciative of that. Miriam.
I agree with what everyone has said so far. And Talia, your word awareness is very, very appropriate and very explanatory. I think also, really do it, it leaves them very little room for gossiping. The idea sometimes when people gossip is they're kind of schmoozing with the friend, and before you know it, maybe they're both saying things that they should not be saying. That includes everyone. So it leaves little room for complaining because you don't have that time to complain. You're busy feeling grateful all day long. Now, of course, in my tender years, I'm grateful to be vertical in the morning to stay. And so I always say, thank you, God. And she always answers me and says, sweetheart, you're welcome. She always says that. So I start with my gratitude and giving a blessing.
Right. So absolutely. One of the things we're going to have is gratitude. We're going to be aware of all the beautiful things, but the mystics say there's another level. Let's talk about like eating. If you say a bracha, the motzi, before you eat, according to the mystics, if you stop and say a prayer before you do an action, that's usually mundane action, it elevates the action to a holier level. It becomes you more aware that it's miraculous, like eating, just eating or stopping before you. If you ever watch any of these Orthodox, of course they do it by rote, but if you ever watch any of these Orthodox shows, every time they eat, you see them go, blah, 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 blah. They're saying a motzi, they're saying a borei priya gafen, they're saying borei priya eitz on the apple, but they stop for a minute and they say a blessing. Now, some of them seem like they're just doing it, but if you're actually stopping and looking at that apple and then you eat it, it's a feeling, it sort of elevates, according to the mystics, it says, understanding the meaning behind blessings and the power they possess can transform the mundane act of eating, for example, into a deeply spiritual experience. Before biting into an apple, we thank God for making the apple, thus making the physical act of eating a holy act. And in doing so, we elevate ourselves from the level of animal behavior to the lofty level of human being. Because animals, the implication is they just tear into it, whereas we are taking a moment to thank God and just acknowledge. I'm sure, I remember a Holocaust survivor, a friend of mine, Legat Man actually wrote a play about after the war when they came out, and he had fruit. They hadn't had like an orange in 5 years. And then he told me when he came to America, he'd never had a banana in Poland until he came to America. And it was just incredible. The taste, the sweetness, the consistency, it was. And, the mystics are saying every time should be like that. We should marvel. Actually, there's a sun-kissed cantaloupe you only have this time of year and only at Gelson's. It's unbelievably sweet. And it's like a miracle to eat that fruit. And I'm very conscious of that. So they're saying there's sparks of holiness in the food. And when we eat that food, the holiness is unlocked and nourishes the soul. So when you stop and say a bracha over something that you eat or do, you're nourishing yourself. You're not just thanking God. You're not just bringing, holiness into the world on a mystical level, but you're actually elevating your own soul, enriching yourself by saying this blessing. Somebody else, yes, Robert. 1 second, Robert.
I think that part of the elevation is that you're taking something that could seemingly be mundane that you're doing by yourself, and you're connecting it to your fellow Jews, you're connecting it to our history, and you're connecting it to our God. So I think a lot of us, especially during the pandemic, feel like we're just little automatons sort of buzzing around in our little corners of the world. And doing something like that, you tie into all of those things that I said, which should give you a feeling of connection and elevation.
Yeah, you don't feel so alone when you're doing something and that was the thing about the high holidays, even though I was very aware, and I was watching it too, by the way, because I had already done it. I was watching it and I knew that everybody else was watching it. And even though I couldn't see them or whatever, I felt like we were together in some way because we were participating. Susan Ehrlich, did you want to say?
Yes, I have a question. First of all, I agree with you about the high holidays. I thought they were absolutely wonderful.
They were
poignant. It was poignant because we're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
And this is the way we're operating now because of what? Because of a pandemic.
Right.
They were beautiful. And I'd like to see them again because
you can go online and you can watch them. You can watch them as many times as you want. They're
I know, but I mean, doing it again when other holidays come to have this available. But something, I started doing that because I saw it with my Orthodox relatives, and it causes you to stop. I stop before I eat and say thank you. Now, what about meat? What's the blessing for meat?
No, when you say it for bread, it covers all food.
Okay, good. Because when I do fruit too, I thought, this is not lechem.
No, the lechem, when you're in a meal, if you're having a meal, you just say it on bread and it covers the entire meal. If you're eating a fruit by itself.
Yeah, food by itself or
it's borei pri ha'etz.
Ha'etz.
Created fruit of the tree.
What about meat? Is there a blessing?
Okay, well then there's another general blessing. Shehakol niyeh b'dvaro, that everything is under his domain. And that goes for all other foods. Most other foods.
So what is that?
Shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. It's all under it's all his work. It's all under him. And then if you're eating cookies or cake, though, there's another one. Borei minei mizonot.
I have that, but I thought, you're supposed to be vegetarians, and then is there a blessing for
No. It's the meat or the chicken or whatever, that all goes under. If you eat bread, that's why people usually eat a piece of bread, and then that covers everything. Okay. Yes, Miriam.
I'm going to bring it to another level because right now it's up there. It's beautiful. It has to do with elevation.
Right.
I love all those words that were used, and especially Robert's word, connectedness, which is a word that we can repeat almost on a daily basis to feel part of a larger.
Okay, Miriam, you got to talk closer.
Let me get to my point. Now, I once taught a course 1,000 years ago called Reeducating Appetite for Life. And what we taught, I taught it together with a professor, and what we taught was this: elevate yourself with the blessing, and then do not deprive yourself of any food. But if you feel like you have a piece of chocolate cake, eat it, but cut it in half of what you thought you were going to eat. Cut it again in a very thin slice, eat it extremely slowly and enjoy every piece of it. You don't need the quantity. You wanted the taste, not deprive yourself of it. Just eat it. And that goes for all the food in front of you. If you're on a diet and you want to lose weight, then try to eat half of what's in front of you.
Okay, but we're not talking about that.
I don't
now.
mean, yes, I knew I would lower it to such a terrible mundane
No,
level, but we're
that's
faced
okay.
with food every day of our lives.
No, not at all. But you're right. That is very helpful. The last thing about, there are times when, people say, give me a blessing from a rabbi. Now, Hasidic rabbis were considered conduits of God's blessing, like that was the thing. They were the intermediary. Remember in Fiddler on the Roof, God is there, Rabbi is there a blessing for the czar. Remember that? May God keep the czar far away from us. Bless and keep the czar far away from us. But there are a few blessings where we ask God literally to bless, that we become the conduit, like the Mishnah Berach, where we say, God, please bless this person with healing. Or the only one that comes to mind for me was the priestly blessing. The priestly blessing used to be only the domain of the high priests in the temple. And then in the Orthodox world today, it's only the Kohanim, who are the descendants of the high priests in the temple. But in the Reform, and I'm not sure, maybe conservative world, we bless our children and we bless each other, and we all use that blessing. And what we do is we channel God's blessing, or we ask God to bless. It's may God bless you and watch over you. This is the priestly blessing, and it's in the Torah. May God bless you and watch over you. May God shine his countenance on you, or shine on you and be gracious to you. May God lift you up, or lift his face to you, different translations, and grant you peace.
Right.
So that is like the one blessing that in our tradition as Reform Jews, we can grant to each other. And the other one is the blessing over the children that parents do on Shabbat. And they say to the boys, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh. And we talked about that those were Joseph's sons, and the only two brothers in the Torah that didn't fight. Actually, Moses and Aaron didn't really fight. I don't know, but they don't use them. And may you be like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah for the daughters. So those are the only ones where we are channeling. But the rest is we are thanking God and elevating ourselves and the experience that we're having. So that's a bracha. And now we have the other word, a prayer, a tefilah. And I did a lot of research and found lots of different, explanations and discussions about it, because it's pretty interesting. And first of all, davening, I didn't know this. Davening, as we know, is the Yiddish word for prayer, but it comes from divine, from the word divine, connecting with the divine. And I did not know that until I started researching it. So I thought that was really interesting. When you're davening, you're divining, you're with the divine. So davening is the Yiddish word for prayer. And it has, there are 3 prayer services. First of all, it's very interesting. Originally, Jews did not pray. They gave sacrifices instead. That was how they connected to God. And our first, Moses communicated with God, Abraham communicated with God. They questioned God. I think about Rebecca. Well, I don't know if this is prayer, but she said, why, when she had such terrible pain in her stomach from the twins, she said, God, why am I alive? What's going on? Why am I alive? Is that a prayer? The rabbis don't consider any of these really prayers until Hannah, who was the mother of the prophet Samuel. And we actually read the story of Hannah on Rosh Hashanah. It's the Haftorah, which I don't know if we read this year because we made things a little shorter because they were online. But the story of Hannah, it takes place in the land of Israel in the very beginning when there were no prayer services or anything. And she's your typical Jewish woman who's barren, who has a co-wife who has children, and she's miserable. And every year they go to give thanks at the sanctuary, at the altars, because there were altars all over the country before the temple was built. So this had to be like 1100 BCE in terms of where it would be have taken, because the temple was built around 1000 BCE. So it's pre all the kings before, actually, of course, because her son Samuel is the one who anointed the first king, Saul.
Right.
So it's, pre-kings, and they would go, and what you do is, if you don't recall, you sacrifice some of the animal, you give some to the priest, and then you eat it as a family. You eat like the cooked meat together, and that's part of the sacred experience, and you're eating. And it says how her husband Elkanah preferred her to his other wife, Peninnah. Sorry, that was her name, Peninnah. And gave her a double portion, but she was so sad because she didn't have a child. And so after they were all finished, she snuck back into the sanctuary part, and she started talking to God, praying, quietly moving her lips and saying, God, if you'll give me a child, I promise I will devote him to you, meaning I will bring him back here to be raised as, someone working with priests. Just give me a child, a son. And the priest, his name was Eli, came and saw her and saw this woman, with her eyes closed and her mouth moving enough. He didn't hear anything. And he thought she was a drunkard. He said, woman, you're drunk. What are you doing here? And she said, no, my Lord, I am praying, asking God for a child. I'm asking God for a child. It's all I want. And I promise to devote him to God. And Eli said, go home. You're going to have a child. And she had a son, and she named him Shmuel, or Samuel, which means God heard, God listened. And she brought him back to the sanctuary where they were, and left him there to be raised. And then it also says, I don't know if it's in the text or in the commentary, that she had many other children, because everybody goes, well, she had a child and she gave him away. And he grew up to be Samuel, one of the greatest prophets, one of our greatest prophets, early prophets. So the rabbis and the Talmud said, this is the rubric for prayer. You have to say it, move your lips, you have to speak, you don't think it. It's not meditation, you talk it, and part of it has to come from your heart. It has to be, there's part of it that later on they arrange, like this prayer, that prayer, whatever, but part of it has to be a spontaneous outpouring of your heart. That is true prayer. And after the exile, the first temple was destroyed in 586 BCE, if you recall, and they took all of the elite population, the educated population, to Babylonia as captives, and Babylonia is Iraq. In case you don't remember, that's where they went. And there was no temple, and there was no way to communicate with God, and people were very, very upset. And so this group of elders that we don't even know who they were called the Men of the Great Assembly. We don't even know what the Great Assembly was, but they were called the Men of the Great Assembly, and they wrote some prayers for people. This was the first formalized prayer events, was in Babylonia with the Men of the Great Assembly, and the first synagogues happened there. And the word for Hebrew of synagogue is Beit Knesset, which just means house of gathering. It was like a Jewish community center, basically, a gathering place where they did all kinds of things. They did business, they probably made matches, they studied, and they did prayer. And the oldest prayer that we know of was the Amidah, the one that we still say today, which if you're Orthodox, it's called the Shmona Esrei, which means the 18, because it has 18. Well, they say they're blessings, but before each blessing, there's a request. There's 18 requests. God, keep the evil people away from us. God, take care of our leaders and our rabbis. God, heal the sick. God, all these different, this is the first prayer was a series of requests and blessings. You asked and then you blessed and said, thank you. You asked and you blessed. Those are the Shmona Esrei prayers. So to the tefilah, and as Nina said, though, the word tefilah comes from the word halel, which could mean executing judgment, as she said, or thinking, but heat palel, that heat is reflexive, meaning you're doing it to yourself. So you're also judging yourself. You're connecting with your worth, and then you're asking God for what you need. And they call tefilah prayer service of the heart, that you are, as it said, speaking from your heart. But then the rabbis started to organize it, and they created these 3 different prayer services that you have: the morning one, the afternoon one, and the evening one. And in the morning one and in the evening one, you always say the Shema. They added the Shema. Then they started creating these prayers. And if you look at the, it's called a ladder of prayer. It starts with gratitude. Like one of the first prayers is Modeh ani lefanecha. I thank you, God, for returning my soul to me, giving me life each day. It starts with gratitude, then praise, and then asking for things, the asking. And then at the end, which we don't do ever in Reform, is the tachanun, which is kind of a confessional section where you admit any wrongs you've done every day in the tachanun. So they formed this whole prayer service, but you don't have to pray like that. That is like a formalized kind of prayer. And I want to talk to you about, they say, okay, so the question is, if you look at on page 6, I wrote, what's the reason for prayer? We don't pray. Actually, I want to tell you a midrash. In the book of Genesis, in the story of creation, they talk about how God created all the vegetation, but they didn't really grow. And according to the midrash, until Adam prayed for rain. And the reason is that you pray so you can connect to God. It's not for God to answer your needs, but it's for you to have this relationship with God. It says, we human beings don't pray to have our needs met. We have needs in order to pray. We have needs. This is how we remind ourselves that God exists. This is how we build a relationship with God. And the shortest prayer is a healing prayer. It's when in the desert, Miriam gossiped, but there's more to the story than that. But basically, she came down with leprosy or a skin disease, and God said, El na rafana la, please God heal her now. And we still say that prayer when we want for healing. We say El na, El is God, na, please, Rafa na la, please heal her now. And that was like and he did. So now the how many people, you know about the Baal Shem Tov, right? He was the creator of the Hasidic movement. His grandson was Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, Rabbi Nachman. And the Breslov Hasidim have a whole different way of looking. If you want to go online and look up the Breslov Hasidim or Rabbi Nachman, there's like a huge website about Rabbi Nachman, Nachman, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, which is a town in Poland. I guess it's Poland, Lithuania, Poland, whatever. And people still go to his grave or his tomb and pray for miracles. And he was a mystic. He was also a depressive. He was very depressed, and he suffered from depression and dark times. He was very human, like the Baal Shem Tov seems like, beyond us. But Rabbi Nachman was always, he was in pain a lot. He felt sad, and he was always looking for ways to elevate and heal himself. And he talks about, how do you pray? And this is so different. Listen to this. As often as you can, take a trip out to the fields to pray. All the grasses will join you. They will enter your prayers and give you strength. When no words come, do not despair. Come back day after day to your secluded spot and wait. Just wanting to speak to God in itself is a great thing. Even if all you can say to God is help, it will still be good. Repeat this over and over again until God opens your lips and words begin to flow from your heart. And I feel like that's from personal experience with him. Like he went out and he didn't know what to say. And he just said, help me, help me, help me. And every day you go out. And so the Hasidim definitely believe God hears our prayers and answers our prayers, sometimes saying no. He doesn't have to grant you your prayer. It doesn't mean he's not answering your prayer. So this is also another beautiful thing it says. Why pray? Okay, why pray? Tell me why. What do you think is there, how many people do pray? Not here. I mean, most of us probably don't pray that much. How many people pray? Okay, David, I'm curious because you haven't spoken. Do you want to share about your prayer practice or what you pray for, anything?
Yeah, I guess I do find it connects me with God. It elevates me. So I guess reorienting yourself in a sense of gratitude. So if you find you have something lacking, you can make it fulfilled. And if you find that if you want or need something, it'll make you feel like it'll grow in you. And if you feel like you have something, it'll make you more aware of it so that you could appreciate what you have that you might have just taken for granted by mistake. So, and I think I've always heard that I always like to think of, the definition of a Jew is like Yehuda. It would be like giving thanks to someone who gives thanks to God.
That's
Yehudim.
right.
So I just feel like it defines who we are. And
That's
And I
great.
think it's important to reorient yourself because you can get depressed in this world, like you said. I know Rabbi Nachman was a great teacher of that because he had so much suffering in his life, in his world, and he was somehow trying to teach people to be happy and grateful despite that. So, and I think that's the key. It's like how to reorient yourself and connect to something bigger in the universe, something greater. This whole universal consciousness and elevate your own consciousness.
Thank you. And he's right. Yehuda comes from the word todah, which means thank you. Okay, David Trainer, I wanted to hear from you too.
Well, that was almost word for word what I would have said. I mean, my short version of that would be that to pause and pray is to remind yourself of a connection to something much larger than yourself. I don't think of it as about getting something but so much as becoming conscious of something that you feel but have forgotten about for a moment.
Oh, yes. This is such beautiful thoughts. Who else wants to talk about their prayer practice? Merle?
I find that when I try to carve out my time in the morning, when I wake up, I'm always anxious about, what's my blood sugar going to say today? and it's real, so I find that the time I carve out for meditation and prayer helps soothe my anxiety. That I'm connected to something, yes, but why am I doing this? Because I discovered that it helps my anxiety about all of what I have to do.
That's beautiful also. Who else wants to talk about why they pray, if they pray? Talia?
So I had a friend tell me one time that in order to keep my old habits that were not good or like my ego in check, that whenever I wanted to give a suggestion that wasn't asked or like an opinion that wasn't asked for, or if I felt like I was getting upset about something, I didn't have like the grace somehow that Ruth Bader Ginsburg had all her life. But I was told, right? Like some of the things that had been said to her, I would have like smoke would like steam out of my ears. So someone told me, drink water, and it'll like block your mouth from saying things that you may regret. And then also, it'll be healthier. And then, it's just, you'll have time to pray. You'll have moments to yourself. If you drink a lot of water, you'll be using the restroom, and then you can like literally use that time to pray because you won't be in a space with other people. So I know it's ridiculous, but it so worked.
Oh, that's interesting. Drink water when you're really aggravated. I'll have to remember that. As anyone else want to talk about the reason that you pray? Sometimes, oh yes, Nina.
Okay, so I think when you look around you, there is so many things that are growing or is that you didn't contribute to it personally. Okay, the development from being a shepherd to being a farmer was a big step for the people of Israel. When they saw animals becoming more animals and more sheep, and then they sleep in the desert in caravans, and they look at the stars, and they see what a great plan was there that they couldn't imagine how it became to be. Till today, I'm looking up there and I'm thinking that there must be a plan, because the moon comes out every time at the same time, and the sun comes up at the same time, and it's there, and the stars are there, and how there must be a plan. It couldn't be that it's random.
Right.
I don't think it's random.
Right.
Though a lot of scientists say it is. I'm just thinking that there must be a force or a power greater than me, then caused all this, and we are actually vulnerable to this being, to this thing, to this plan that's around us, and that nobody can, till today, could actually really explain. Like Einstein said, that science without faith doesn't make any sense.
He also said either nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle.
Exactly.
He said that too.
So I really think that Albright, when he wrote the book of Genesis and explained it, and he wasn't even Jewish, he said that the Jewish religion started actually by the shepherd in the desert, or by the caravan keepers. That they looked at the sky and they thought that there must be a plan. And
there must be a plan.
So much. And then that's how they started to believe in the one God.
Yes.
And when we changed from shepherds to farmers, when God said to us or to Joshua and his people, Ki tavo el haaretz unta'atem kol etz tchila. Come to the land and plant every tree, the first thing that you show up there. That means start growing your things and be responsible for whatever it is that's going to be presented to you to live from. And that's how we developed the 7 kinds with the figs and the dates, and this stuff. So we are till today, depending on rain, we depend on sunshine, we depend on all those things that makes things grow, including people. And till somebody else is going to tell me something that will make sense to me, that will explain all this, I'm praying.
That's beautiful. Well, also the thing is that if we believe that everybody is made in the image of God, and we all can contain a divine spark. We all contain a spark of that holiness. I find when I pray, I'm also talking to myself. I'm talking to my soul. I'm saying, please, make me a kind. There's one that I love that's teach me the art of sacred living. That's one of my favorite phrases from the Siddur. When I'm saying, teach me the art of sacred living, I'm putting it out and I'm putting it in at the same time, because my sacred living depends on me. It's not like God, I activate my own soul to a consciousness when I pray that changes me. And that's what the rabbis say. When you pray, it's not to change the mind of God, it's to change us through prayer. That by, again, elevating ourselves or activating our soul or praying for the good things, it's sort of also, in Judaism, they say, the Hasidim and the mystics, only a really, really high pure person can pray and have things change. The rest of us have to do something as well. We have to act. And, you know, the phrase that Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, you know, made so famous was praying with our feet. Like we pray when we do go out and do something, some kind of goodness. That's a kind of a prayer and an acknowledgement as well. We don't just, and you know that joke about the flood. I'll just repeat it. There was a terrible flood and a man was on a roof and the water was rising and rising, and a rowboat came by and said, come on, we'll take you to dry land. And he said, no, God's going to save me. And then a raft came by, a big like tugboat with a raft of people. Come on, this. We'll save you. No, God's going to save me. And then a helicopter, it was so high, he was like at the very tip of his roof, said, we're going to lower a ladder and we'll save you. And he said, no, God's going to save me. And he drowned. So he goes to heaven and he says to God, how come you didn't save me? And God says, what do you mean? I sent you 3 people. So we are the instrument. I mean, it's an oldie, but the idea that, you know, prayer is sometimes, we are the answer to some prayers, and other people can be the answer to our prayers. And that's another way of, you know, being in connection with God and being in the prayer experience. At the end of this thing, I actually gave you some prayers in English that you might like. And the prayer that I love is this prayer there is a prayer or a thank you prayer or a bracha for when you go to the bathroom even. And it's about how we thank you that the things that are opened, and the things that are closed, and everything works, that our body works properly. Because if you have any kind of ailment where your body isn't functioning properly, you realize how difficult life can be. And we take it for granted, just the simple functioning of our body until it stops, whether it's our knees or our hips or our digestive system or whatever, until it stops. So that is like one of the first prayers. And, you know, we have the prayer for the sick, there's even a prayer that I'm going to just read and close with this. It's the personal request. This is in English. Master, Almighty Master of the universe, who has given me life, my health, my family, my friends, and my potential to develop as a human being, to grow and to come close to you. Please, whatever, give me, help me, whatever. And then thank you, Almighty, for this and for everyone and everything you have given me. So the style of prayer is to first acknowledge your gratitude. And then if you need something, as Reb Nachman says, pour out your heart, pour out your heart. Even that release can be healing instead of keeping it inside, you know, and walking around with it. A place to go and cry or scream or whatever you need to do. That's part of the prayer experience. So, yes, we're done. Anybody have anything to say before we finish? I pray you have a beautiful week. I thank God that we have this class, and it's such a pleasure to be with you all. And happy Sukkot, and Chag Sameach, and Shabbat Shalom. And I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Happy
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Chag Sameach.
Will you be in this class again, Susan?
What?
Tell me about, are you going to be teaching?
Next week is our last, and then it switches. All these other classes, which you will be getting notified with this week.
But will you be teaching, Susan?
Right?
Will I what?
Will you be teaching?
I'll be teaching some of them, yes. Not all of them. We're going to be switching around.
Will we get a women's Torah study thing going again, ever?
We could, yeah. If there's a big desire for that, I could add that as well. We want to do that.
Even if it was just like it was every 2 weeks.
Okay, I'll do that too. Sure.
Thank you. All right.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you so much.
And I don't know if the women's thing would work because there are too many men that want to join you. And that's
agree.
great.
I agree.
And they
I'll
feel
tell you though,
denied.
in
I
the
Talia,
spring,
they feel denied.
in the
I know.
winter, I am going to be teaching a class of like 10 or 12 great Jewish women in history that you've never heard of. And we're going to learn all about these different women. And most of them, none of you ever heard of.
That's great. And Miriam, I agree with you. I welcome them.
Yeah, welcome the men too. So I don't know, maybe, I don't know, we'll see.
But I'm not saying to have a women's Torah study that's only women. I'm saying that we look at it from a women's perspective so that men could be in the group.
That we can do
Yeah,
anyhow.
we can do that. It could be the women's-oriented Torah study.
Because I thought that's what we were doing before. I didn't realize that men weren't
They weren't.
allowed to come.
No, well, I inherited that class from Rabbi Karen Fox, and it had been women's Torah study for like 20 years or 15 years, but we can do that where we do a women-oriented Torah study.
Yeah, I thought it was all about just like looking at the women in the Torah and their part in it and from like their perspective.
That was my choice. I did that. You know,
Love it.
Me. But we've done it. I don't know. We have to figure out another point of view. But all right, we'll look at that. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.